All right, welcome back to Grimerica Outlawed. We have Peyman Askari with us. He's a fellow Canadian, a fellow Canuck, and he's come here to kick progressive butt and chew bubblegum, and he's out of bubblegum. I love that. Get a chuckle when I read that every time. He ran for office in Vancouver. Now he hosts his own podcast where he's trying to educate Canadians on the core issues. So we're going to talk about all this kind of stuff we've been talking about on the show. Welcome to Grimerica, Peyman. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope you don't mind. I mean, you've probably talked about this so much, but I mean, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear a little bit about the experience of, you kind of going through the whole thing, realizing like, during COVID in 2020, you're in West Van, decided to run for politics for the PPC party, and just a little bit about that experience. I think it's probably worth our listeners would probably love to hear that. Um, you know.
Of course. I was born in Iran in '83. There was a war going on between Iran and Iraq, and my parents got me out. We went to Germany. We bounced around there for a bit, and then '89 we landed out east in Ottawa, Montreal, and then we moved to Ottawa for a year. 1990, I came to Vancouver. From 1990 to 2001, I went through the high school system, and my whole goal was, I just thought it was so cool I got here as a 4 or 5 year old kid. I wanted to mix in. All my friends were Canadian, and I grew up Canadian. I thought, being Canadian and being part of Canada was the greatest thing in the world. We were like Americans, only better. We had less crime, and we took better care of each other. We weren't all crazy, like this whole anti-American sentiment. And behind all of this, I didn't know at the time, you have this concept, you believe that you have the rule of law. You believe that there's no corruption in Canada. And that belief stuck with me until 2020. I was working in the Middle East. They stole a whole bunch of money from me. I was working there for 6 years. Everything blew up in my face, and I came back home. But I said, at least I'm a Canadian with the rule of law. And then COVID just made me realize that no, we are no different than the Middle East here in Canada.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy. I mean, it's so weird to hear somebody. That's kind of my sentiment too. Grew up in Vancouver in the 90s and early 2000s, and then moved, to Alberta and Saskatchewan since then. But I had the same feeling of it. It felt like, hey, we're pretty much safe. I remember the American sentiment too, like we're better than them, but it wasn't like so vitriolic as it is now. We would still go down there and respect the country, but it's changed so much. So then how did that lead to you deciding to actually try and do something about it?
I got sick on the way back from. I used to work in Azerbaijan. It's a post-Soviet republic. I got the hell out of there before they locked the country down. I got sick on the way back. Maybe it was COVID, and then I got better. And the country was under quarantine at this point. And my friends, one by one, they came to me and they said, "How was it? Like, was it like you were dying? Weren't you? Aren't you lucky you're alive?" I'm like, "Not really. It was like a regular cold." And they turned around and they said, "Oh, you must be lucky, Payman. You probably caught a mild strain." Like instantly they turned into a virologist. And like one by one, I noticed my friends lost their minds. They lost their objectivity. When the liquor stores started mandating masks, that's what it really woke me up, because it's one thing to do it in government buildings and maybe even in the lobby of your apartment, but to do it in a private business. So I just started getting more politically involved. I went into protests. I wrote letters. I became the CEO of our electoral district association for the PPC. And then finally, I was like, you know what? It's terrifying, but I have to run for public office. I can't expect, other people like Brian Peckford in his 90s to solve these problems for us.
It was terrifying. So, because it's not really something you wanted to do, but you're like, you kind of have to do it to try and be a part of making the change.
But yeah, and remember, like I ran in West Vancouver, and it is an insanely liberal riding. All the immigrants that come in, they're all liberal. It's a rich area. So running for the PPC, like I might as well have just been running for the KKK.
Yeah, it's I know people personally in that district riding that voted conservative for the first time in their life. Like, so the, personal people that kind of shifted to conservative, but I do think that, thinking back now, PPC is just too much, right? They're too much for them. Probably worry about splitting votes and all that kind of stuff, right? Especially having the conservatives. Wasn't it very close, conservatives to liberals?
In the writing, I know that the
Yeah.
Liberal one, Patrick Weiler,
That was cool.
he got ushered in by the previous Liberal who took him under her wing. It really showed the ugly side of politics to me. Like people, they're voting based on emotion, which is bad enough, but then they're voting based on what their parents voted on. You know, like the political parties are. It's a part of the national identity now, and it's hard to make people realize. Like you do realize that's part of the problem. So the problem is our national identity.
Yes, my mom has experienced that. She's like, I'm having talking to my friends, and they're like, I'm gonna vote liberal because I've always voted liberal, or I'm gonna, or that my parents did, and like we've always done it in the family, and or vote like NDP, and I'm like, wow, you're exactly right. They're stuck in this like generational thing that they've always supported this party, that, and the parties have shifted. I mean, the whole window has shifted to the left, in my opinion.
What's the number one immigrant base there in that riding?
The demographics, they're not really immigrants, but it's German. German's first one, and then it's like Chinese, Ukrainian, and it's Iranian is only like 4%. I thought they were like 50, but they're only 4. Chinese is probably the biggest visible immigrant population.
Doesn't it seem? I mean, are the Chinese people are they liberal by nature? Is that because it's starting to seem almost unorganic in a sense when I start looking at these mass influx of immigration from all these different countries that on paper should probably be somewhat conservative, right? They're either coming from countries that have a religious background of conservatism, or they're escaping countries that are so far left that they don't want to be there anymore because they're slipping into communism and socialism. And then they just come here and start voting for leftist policies. I mean, it's I'm starting to have some real questions about the immigrant population and how they're voting, and if it is actually organic or if it's not some sort of like I look at the problem with our free societies in America and Canada is they're just more ripe for infiltration than any other of the societies on the country just because of their nature. We allow people to come in, we allow them to take office, we allow them to become citizens, and we allow them to vote. And it's for better or for worse. I think that we're kind of naive to the possible like state backed um movements that could open up the door to.
Canada's kind of stuck in a trap, and it has been for several decades, where the Liberals they brought in all these immigrants and they showed them respect. Now, probably it was fake respect. Like we love all of you brown people. Go over there in that ghetto. Every 4 years, voting time, vote for us. And that's all the immigrants need to hear. So if there's policies that they disagree with, like sterilization of children through transitioning them, removal of parental rights, removal of religious rights, all of that is secondary to all the Liberals have to do is come to the immigrants and say, if you vote conservative, they will kick you out of the country. And they lose their critical thinking skills and they vote Liberal.
Wow. Do you think that I know there's some controversy over foreign born representatives, MPs. Do you think you should be allowed to do
It's
that?
ironic before you
Especially-
get to that. It's ironic that the Liberals are about to kick 2 million of them out of the country, but
Well, I don't think they're going to kick them out. They're just going to make
well,
them-
they're just going to let their papers lapse, I guess.
Yeah, but that's not going to make it to the immigrant community, right? Like having access to the mainstream media, even though the CBC is dying, mainstream media is dying, they can put out the narrative that they love all brown people, all black people, all whatever, insert color here. And then and they can quietly push the others out the back door, and they can then turn that into a positive. It's a shame that it has come to this because of far right parties like the Conservative Party of Canada. We will continue to fight. They're experts at spin.
What did you consider running with the Conservatives instead of PPC?
I reached out to the Conservative Party. So the smallest unit of a party is called an association. So the Electoral District Association. I reached out to them multiple times, and I was like, "Listen, man, I run a company. I have this, that, and the other. How can I help you? COVID's out of control." They never really got back to me, and eventually they did, and they're like, "Do you want to help us set up a barbecue?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I guess, but I can do so much more." And then I got frustrated, and I just went to the PPC.
Okay, yeah, interesting. That kind of makes sense. That's not really a surprise. It seems like. So do you? I go ahead.
Do you want me to answer your previous question?
Yeah, I guess because it's just weird how it's coming up. I mean, we've been talking about it on our show as if as we're not sure if that's even should be allowed or not. But and you're happen to be not born here and running for it, so
I mean, you could do it. I held a space during the election, and I brought some PPC candidates and people, and we talked about this specifically, and I was probably the one that was most vocal that said, you should not let foreigners run. But the general consensus was that's not our biggest problem right now. So our biggest problem is that we have corrupt politicians. We have, we have no moral compass. And they're using the immigrant community to ram these policies through. So if you look at the Liberal Party, it's like a United Colors of Benetton commercial, right? Like you get this diverse group of people like that. Who's that Gary guy, the Minister of Public Safety, he has no business.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the fat chump munchkin looking guy. He has no business being there. But let's say if you outlawed all foreigners from running, my whole argument is all of this has been brought on by Canadians, from Pierre Trudeau to Mulroney to Chrétien. It'll help. It's a good step, but it's not enough.
Darren, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree with Peyman. It shouldn't be allowed. It's I mean, I think that it was fine for a long time because we were mostly immigrating people that wanted to come here and be Canadians, like Peyman, come here, this is great. But that at some point in the last decade, maybe it's longer, but it seems like the last decade or two, that switched to this sort of ghettoization that you mentioned, where it's like all of this sort of assimilation is gone. And some people say, well, that's good, they shouldn't be assimilated. Well, they should be. If you want to come, we had kind of, for better or worse, we had something going here that was all right. There was some corruption. It wasn't perfect, but you could make a living. There wasn't so many people falling through the cracks. And now we kind of opened up these floodgates, and we're getting into the point where I can go into a business and they don't they can't even speak English. We're kind of getting to that point where we're losing this thing of communication, and we're losing like the safety of our roads because we're allowing these sort of trucking companies to take over. And where I am, it's kind of a problem. But if you start looking like out east, where they've got windy roads and snow and a lot more snow and stuff like that, it's become a thing to the point where I even notice with like the people that I grew up with on my Facebook that are like mostly pretty either not paying attention or sort of still left because that's just the way things are supposed to be or that sort of thing. And you can see them all slowly sort of coming around. Honestly, it seems like the truck driving will be the big one, but we sort of, now that we've got this sort of unfettered immigration and we've got whole districts like Brampton that have switched to Indian, and they're always going to be Indian now. And it's just sort of this slow takeover starts happening that I don't know how we put the genie back in the bottle, honestly. I mean, we had someone on that was saying, well, it's the Canadians' fault because they don't run. And I would agree with that to a certain extent, but in a lot of ways, we're past the point of that. You know what I mean? There's districts in Calgary that no white guy's ever going to win ever again. It don't fucking matter because they've got a lot more brand loyalty than we do at the end of the day. They'll vote for the dude that looks like them or has the same name as them or came from the same place they did just for that reason. Whereas, we can just find a million reasons not to do it. But you look at places like Brampton, suburbs of Calgary, probably a bunch of different ridings in the Toronto and things like that. I mean, it's not so much hitting the national scale yet, but especially on these local levels, the local city stuff like that. You can see where, like BC, I mean, it's kind of interesting because you're right in the belly of the beast. It seems like BC is going to be the first one. I can see in my lifetime where BC has a government that is majority run by people that were not born in Canada.
It might already be the case. I mean, again, I go back to the Liberal Party, like Varani, Bendayon, Nakvi, that munchkin-looking hamster guy, but Gary. A lot of these people, maybe they were born here, but like they're not. I don't know, how do I put this delicately? They look different from you. They're a little bit different. They're culturally different, like me, right? But I wasn't even born here. I go back to the question Graham asked. Should we ban foreigners from running? You can, but I don't think you're addressing the main issue, which is, Canada is failing, and it's been failing for a long time. So we don't have any industry relative. What we have is a housing industry, and that's it. It's a Ponzi scheme.
It's hard to think that's not by design, right? I mean, it's hard to think that people way smarter than us haven't figured out that you can't just fucking build an economy on selling each other houses back and forth. And it's kind of, I was just watching a thing last night where it was getting into how much the like underlying effects of this having the entire economy be based on housing as real estate is that there's this sort of side effect that no one really talks about. Whereas if you were a business that, was making some money and you had $5 million or you made 10 million bucks, you could, whereas in some places you might choose to reinvest that money back into the business, automate some stuff, buy some better machines so that your business can be more profitable. But in Canada, it's easier to just buy 100 acres on the outside of town with that money and wait 5 years. And now it's basically tax free and there's way less risk than investing in your business. So I just thought that was sort of an interesting angle on how this Ponzi scheme of the housing market even starts to affect the productivity of our companies.
Yeah, you mentioned Ponzi scheme. In a perfect world, the value of land wouldn't really go up that much. Like if you build a house on it for 100,000, the value of the land would go up by 100,000. But when the government's printing money, and this is since the 72 government of Trudeau, they started printing heavy amounts of money. So you're devaluing the currency, and people, they stop saving their money in cash and they have to put it in other places. You can put it in a business, as you mentioned, but you can also put it in land, stocks, physical gold. Land is just easier, right? Like you don't have, if stock market, I don't know how it works. I don't know what goes up or down, but land, just buy a piece in it and it always goes up. Now, why do they not put it in a business? Because we're starting to regulate everything to death. We're taxing everything to death. You have so many workers' rights. I'm not saying you should work your employees like slaves, but with all of the risks of the market, the government's introducing even more risk through regulations, and the whole system's falling apart.
So was there a point in time when you, or Darren, do you want to continue on that or build on that at all?
Well, I guess my question would just be, why? Is it ignorance? Is it malevolence? I mean, I go back and forth. We go back and forth on the show, but because what I've started to notice, especially since COVID, is this sort of the Atlas Shrugged idiocracy effect is really starting to come in. You start noticing in the big systems first, but now to the point where it's like, you never know what kind of service you're going to get anywhere you go. You could take we're in the era in Canada now, in Alberta yet, which is the youngest and most productive province in the place, where before I gave up construction, we were at the point where we had been taking our work trucks to try and get them fixed, to get certain things fixed at different mechanic shops around town. And we had 4 times that the mechanic shop called us back. Either that, it'd be like something they'd say they fixed it, and then like 2 weeks later it'd be broken again and it'd be back in the shop. For months this is going on. And then we have other shops that are just calling us. They're like, yeah, we don't know, man. We can't fix it. So just come pick it up. And I'm like, man, this was never a thing when I was growing up. There was never been this sort of weird thing where people just can't do basic things anymore. And I wonder if that is infecting the ruling class or the elite class at a higher level, because they're kind of like I don't know what the word I'm looking for. They're just kind of like agnostic to, or not agnostic. That's not the word. They're just kind of ignorant to what's going on at the lower levels. The more sort of money you have and the more money you're born with, the less you even sort of consider these sorts of things. But I kind of go back and forth on whether is it by design? Are these people taking orders from other people or higher powers that are actively trying to destroy the West? Or is it just that we've fallen so far from the fucking apple tree when it comes to intelligence and authenticity and responsibility that we've lost the ability to govern ourselves responsibly?
I think I blame everything on urbanization. So these people that are in these urban centers, they don't view you, for example, Darren, as the same species as them. They view, for them, the economy would be like derivatives, or where we're going now with carbon credits. They just think like this is the world, and that's where they operate. That's where they make their money. Now, the three of us, we know this is called financialization, but they don't see it that way. They see like they're providing a service, whereas Darren is, he's just a nobody. He's not doing anything. It's really the opposite way, right? But those people in that economy are the ones that get into government. The political parties pick them up, and they make decisions either through ignorance, like, yeah, whatever, we'll put a gas tax. Who cares what effect? It won't have any effect. Or their view is we are helping the climate with this carbon tax. Introduce a carbon tax, the price of gas goes up. Darren can't hit as many places. Maybe you got to lower the salary for your mechanics, and then the mechanics don't have the expertise, and everything starts like the wheels start falling off.
I agree with you. Yeah. Was there a point in time during your experience running for this political thing where you just decided like, wow, this is kind of beyond economical repair. Canada is like toast.
Yeah. After the first debate, we had like 6-7 debates.
Yeah.
After the first one, I'm talking about the GDP. I'm talking about the debt, talking about the inflation, the financialization, everyone. And then the audience, the questions they're asking are, our highway, there's a lot of accidents. Who's going to paint, the yellow line with, high vis yellow line? Our buses aren't arriving on time. Somebody asked me a question like, what are you going to do with the garbage? And you can't swear at voters, right? Like, you got to be polite. But I'm like, garbage is not, it's not a federal issue. It's not even provincial. It's municipal or corporate.
Right. And I can't believe those were issues that were coming up in those debates.
Do you ever think about leaving? I mean, especially right now in Canada, the way it is, you see a lot of people heading to Alberta right now from Ontario that, I mean, I don't know. We worry in Alberta because we don't really know who's coming. We know we're getting a lot of South Asian immigrants that that probably aren't going to help the cause down the road, but we're also getting, a couple thousand people from Ontario every week. We're getting some people from Quebec. We're getting people from Manitoba. We're getting a lot of people from BC.
I don't know. Peyman was in Florida. So.
Oh, you're in Florida. Sorry, I thought you were in BC. So you're.
Well, I have one foot in Florida right now. I'm still a Canadian citizen. I don't have visa here. I can only be here for 6 months. But Darren, you ask a good question. Like, when I look at Canada, I don't see different people, right? Like, whatever, the colors might be different. Brampton might be different, but I just look at COVID. I look to my left. I look to my right. Both my neighbors wanted me dead. Both my neighbors wanted me destitute. Both of them wanted me in jail because I refused to take a vaccine. And I asked myself, is this a country that I want to live in? I told you at the beginning that I always wanted to be more Canadian, and I figured eventually I'll meet a Canadian woman, we'll get married, my kids one day or grandchildren will be Canadian. Well, why do I want to be Canadian? Like, this is a question no one can really answer this, and we, there's about 20% of us in the country that are saying something's seriously wrong with this country. What we're saying is something is seriously wrong with us. We have to change our moral foundation. And if you drill down deeper, what we're saying is we need to be more like the Americans. We need to move closer to God. We need to get back to the concept of individualism and move away from the government. Whereas the other 80% that wanted me dead anyway, I don't know about you two, they're saying no. Peyman, Askari are motto here is not life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It's peace, order, and good governance. We want safety, security. If you don't like it, pack up and leave. So, yes, I have thought about it.
I mean, it's exactly what we've been saying. Like it's mind blowing how you just articulated what Darren and I were talking about the neighbors and everything. Like that whole thing we've experienced and we've articulated it. So it's so fascinating to just hear other people from other parts of Canada say that exact same thing and then think about leaving. Because yeah, Alberta's up for, you know, they're going to be, even if they got to separate at some point, it's going to be nasty. It's going to get nasty. Not like Quebec, you know, not like it was for Quebec. And it does feel like, I agree with you, 15-20%. It does feel more like America, those principles, the stuff that Darren and I have been talking about, it just resonates more with that. And maybe Alberta being its own sovereign country would be the same. I think it would be very similar, but I just don't know if that'll ever happen. And I mean, I guess eventually we're going to get into talking about hopefully this security strategy document. I don't think Darren's read it in detail, but I mean, it blew me away. I just read like 2/3 of it this morning, and it's amazing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Do you have any initial thoughts about that?
It's just, I love how it's so easy to read. You know, you don't have to crack out the highlighter. They mentioned the family unit. They oppose these climate initiatives. They're talking about reindustrialization, you know, focusing on the Western Hemisphere. Now, things are a little bit hot right now because Donald Trump violated pretty much every law by kidnapping the president of a sovereign nation. And we're all, you know, waiting to see what comes out of that. Hopefully it'll be something like Dominion and Obama can go to jail for trying to steal the 2020 election and not, you know, George W. Bush 2.0.
I would think, if anything, that it's more of because I was thinking about it because we were talking about it yesterday about how there definitely does seem to be that tie into it. It doesn't seem like Maduro even seemed like a guy that was very upset about getting snatched up. So I was saying I think they made a deal. We were even listening to that thing where Buddy had said they had rallied the helicopters like 5 times before that and canceled them at the last minute to try and throw off the Democrats. And it's like, well, who are you trying to throw off? Obviously, you're trying to throw off people that are going to kill this motherfucker or do something if they find out that you're going to try and snatch him up, which is sort of interesting itself. But I just, you know, by the nature of politics, it seems more likely that they will cram that dude in a back room and use him to blackmail the other party to get, you know, this, that, or the other. It seems like more and more, it seems like blackmail is the currency that runs this fucking place.
It could be. I think one of two things happened. Either they struck a deal with Maduro. They said, you know, we'll come in, we'll arrest you, we'll do a show. Or they bribed some of the generals. Because, you know, Russia gave them anti-air defenses. They didn't fire a single one. So this was kind of orchestrated. You're probably right. Like they want to use him to go after someone, but I don't know who that someone is. Like we're all, you know, we wanted the Epstein files released this year and they didn't release them. They didn't release them for a certain reason. The problem is they're not telling us that reason. Donald Trump administration is not being honest with the people. And their messaging is all over the place. Like, look at Venezuela. We have to go in because of drugs. We took out the boats because of drugs. And then they go in. They're like, well, they stole our oil. This is about oil. And then they arrest them. They're like, well, Dominion machines. When the narrative keeps shifting, people, they're reminded of the George Bush administration. Iraq did 9/11. Actually, well, they got weapons of mass destruction. And then they landed with that one. But there was like 6-7 other reasons why they went in. Like that. Saddam Hussein apparently tried to assassinate George Bush's father and a whole bunch of other ones.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree with you. The messaging is off, and it might not be. I mean, it's going to be a little bit of all those, but it's not. It's probably mainly that. It's probably mainly the security strategy that they have to. That his goal is to fortress up the Western Hemisphere, and maybe they realize that. I mean, I'm not defending them at all, but maybe they realize that people won't really buy that right now. That's a little too early for people to hear that that's the main reason why.
Well, and I mean, part of it is like how many it's like it's easy to go in and make Canada part of the USA. It's easy to go make Greenland part of the USA. It's easy to go arrest Obama and Hillary Clinton. The tricky thing is having a billion people on board, or at least a few 100 million people convinced that it's the right thing to do so that they don't burn the place down. You could see we're at the point where I mean, the Maduro thing's a good example where the left will fucking riot in the streets over freeing Maduro, over whatever you think of the guy. It seems like he wasn't a great guy to his people in Venezuela, but they'll defend him. And if Biden would have done it, they wouldn't have defended him. They would have backed Biden. So it's you wonder how much of it is just like a play. How much of this is just sort of like a grand Truman Show experience so that they can slowly manipulate us into doing what they wanted ultimately at the end of the day, but on longer timelines. I mean, even Mark Carney, he says all this stuff, but then he like moves his company to the States. And it's like, you start to think that the guy's here to he's this globalist banker that seems to be here to almost negotiate the balkanization of Canada to some extent. The policies he puts in, the things he says, it's just sort of, you wonder how much of it is how much of this stuff has already been decided behind closed doors, and now it's just how do we slowly get the public on board with this, little bits at a time, because they lost that ability to just throw it on Walter Cronkite, and Walter Cronkite could just say, "Hey, that's the way it is," and everyone's like, "Oh, all right, that's fine." Now they've got all these competing fucking narratives all the time, and they've got to I'm starting to think it's just all made up. It's just all fucking made up for us to eventually go along, or enough of us to eventually go along with whatever they come up with, that it's like, oh, all right, it's fine.
That's an old school reference to Walter Cronkite. That's even before my time. Yeah, Mark Carney, like, he feels like a liquidator. Like, they just send him in to seize all the assets. And with Canada, it does feel like a decision was made. Probably the king. Like, you don't just bring the king back to give a throne speech. I've never seen that.
Right, exactly. That's almost like a little subtle messaging, so that when the king did it, man, it's not it was the king's idea.
Yeah, they could pin it on him, and I felt bad for the king too. It seems like the Liberal Party wrote his speech, and they're like, "Read this," and like a loyal king, he reads it, and it was a really excellent speech, because there was enough in there from the perspective of the evil liberals. There was enough in there to appease the conservatives. So they said, like, we're going to build up security at the border. And there was some stuff about green initiatives and First Nations, so you appease the NDP. And that's really the purpose of Carney. Some people are even saying they threw Trudeau under the bus. They're like, we need to push the country far left. Let's bring Trudeau in. He'll be the lightning rod. And when he'd gone just like 1/16 of an inch too far, they're like, all right, let's get him out. We'll get Carney in. We'll get things back on track. We'll slow Donald Trump down. With the Americans, I feel it's a little different. So 2016, Trump really got in, and he was an authentic guy. He was not prepared, and they almost killed him, like Russia. 2024, when he got in, I feel like he's not the same person. He's now beholden to a lot of billionaires and powerful forces. But they're prepared. If you remember, the first thing they did when they got in, they got rid of USAID. And they had Mike Benz doing a whole campaign 1 year before, educating the people. They got rid of USAID, and now the left, they don't have the same megaphone they had before. So they're castrated. They're impotent.
There had to be more to Doge than meets the eye too, I think, right?
How so?
I don't know. Just the whole thing seemed fucking funny to me, how they sort of come in and they say it's to cut this, it's to cut that, but they come in and they get these dudes into like all of the major systems. Like, just like they're going in there, and from the clips you see, it's like they're going in there basically telling people to move out of the way. Well, people are maybe in some instances trying to delete stuff or trying to do this, and they send these guys in and they get all the information. And but it was all done. It was the Department of Government Efficiency. So we were going to use it to save all this money. And maybe that's what they're doing in the background. But it just seemed to me like Doge went in. There was kind of some stories about some buyouts and some packages so people could retire early. But then like 2 weeks after that, it's sort of gone and dusted. I mean, I'm of the opinion that Doge was up to something different. I don't know what exactly they were up to, but the mandate seemed to be get them in there as quickly as possible before anything can be, or as little as possible can be deleted or manipulated, and they could get a copy of it. Now, what they're doing with that in the background, I don't know. I mean, it just keeps getting weirder and weirder. You know, it's like this weird fucking. It's like I'm watching the Mission Impossible movies. You know, where it's like because less than 12 hours after they get Maduro, now there's all this shit. Trump's tweeting about election interference again. And we know that, I mean, I forget the name of the company, but we know that Dominion and those machines are owned by a Venezuelan company. I mean, it looks like Chavez was, I mean, we were playing a thing of CNN in 2006 last night complaining about Chavez and these voting machines. And then I think it was Lou Dobbs back when he was still on CNN in 2006. So it's like a 20-year thing with these voting machines down there, and I don't know. It's funny because I was never really a trust the plan guy, but it's like these days, it's like it's almost like this is all the shit, and I'm still not a trust the plan guy because Trump warp speeded us, and I'll never fucking forgive him for that. And I do not believe. I mean, I've had a bunch of people try and convince me on why he warp speeded us. It was for this or that. Maybe it was, but if it was, tell me about it. Because as long as you're not telling me, I have to assume malevolence to some extent. But I mean, this term, it's hard not to be like, okay, something's going on here, right? I mean, didn't they just cut the CDC vaccine schedule like in half this week? I mean, we've been anti-vaxxers on this show for 15 years, since way before it was cool to be an anti-vaxxer, way before COVID, when everybody yelled at you basically for being
When we were not even sure if we should do an episode on it.
And now we get to the point where the stuff is happening to the CDC and things are getting talked about that if you had asked us 10 years ago, we would have said there's no chance in hell that this will ever happen. And it seems to be happening. So, I mean, it's hard not to, I mean, at least we live in interesting times, but it's hard not to at least get a little bit optimistic once in a while, because if it was just a new control mechanism, I don't see why you would let so much of this stuff out into the open. It's almost too much to ever. I guess the concern is that they're able to sort of bamboozle us into some sort of terrible totalitarian thing because they've managed to gain our trust through other methods. But I mean, as of right now, it's hard not to. I mean, Venezuela, illegal. I agree. It seems kind of weird. It's kind of fucked up, but at least they did it without killing anyone. You know, when's the last time that fucking happened? So when it wasn't just bomb the place, when it wasn't just start carpet bombing the place so that the defense companies can make more bombs and sell more of this and sell more of that.
Yeah, like when I criticize Venezuela, look, if he came here tomorrow and he arrested Mark Carney, I would be cheering that on. And if the people of Venezuela want this done, that I can live with that. If things get out of control, this is a regime change, by the way. So if in the next coming weeks and months that country deteriorates, that's going to be a cloud over the Republican Party, and we're heading into the midterms. I can't handle another Democrat government. Like all our futures rest on they not having the House and the Senate, not getting the presidency in 2028.
Right? That's what the scary thing is, because I'm sort of in this position where I go back and forth because I'm a permanent resident, so I can move to the States, I can work in the States, I can go back and forth. But there's sort of like this weakness to the Canadian system and state that's sort of appealing to me, where they can make all these crazy laws, but I'm out in the most conservative spot of the country in the middle of nowhere, so they don't really have the reach to enforce them, whereas America still does. And there's something about when the left is in power in America that seems more scary than what happened. I'm not saying I'm happy with Canada, right? I'm a separatist. I'm anti all of it. But America's ability to ratchet things up and the power of the state when the left is in charge, and we were freezing bank accounts and doing all that stuff in Canada too, but the American system just seems to be so much better at crushing dissent than the Canadian system. So I do worry down there that when the fucking, if like you say, if they lose this shit, it could be. So I guess that there's the question. Let's assume that Trump loses the next election, not the midterms. Let's say he loses the 2028. and you've got the option on your thing. So you've got here's your American passport if you want it, Peyman. Here's your Canadian passport. But the left just won the election. So it's 4 years. They got the House and the Senate. Where do you go? Do you stay down there or do you head back north?
Well, I still think America is, as bad as things could get here, would always be better than Canada. They have more industry. Like when I drive through the US and I hit small towns along the way, you see factories, you see like lumber stacked on top. You go into a hardware store, there's so many tools. In Canada, we don't have industry. I've seen this happen over the last few decades, so that the outlying towns are getting shut down. Everything is being financialized. All the money's going into the housing market. I mean, America might destroy the world, but it'll destroy itself last.
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose there is something. I do like the weakness of the Canadian system to some, because it seems like it's already in slow collapse, right? Like, how do they pull it up? How do they do anything at this point? I really wonder how they fucking pull this thing back together, especially now because it looks like Trump's opening up the floodgates for our trade workers and everything else to start going down there and getting citizenship.
Yeah, I don't know how you fix the country. So Canada has a couple of problems. You have the baby boomer generation that's put everything on their tab. They've racked up the debt, and now the youth have to pick that up. You have the housing market where until that housing market implodes, nobody will want to wake up. And you have immigration. So now the cultural fabric of the society has been ripped up. And as you mentioned, people are going down south because America's taking the skilled workers. We are turning into a third world country. You see this in the Middle East where nothing's working and the West is taking away all the people that could potentially fix it.
Scary. Yeah, I don't see a way out either. But I do want to mention before we move too much further that I do feel like this regime change, I guess you can't not call it that, but it is different. I feel like, like I mentioned when I was with you on that other show, Peyman, on the Freedom Conversation one, but I want to say it here too, is nobody's really answered the question. I'm not expecting you to here, but what do you do if somebody empties their jails and their criminals out into your country and steals your oil? Like how should that be handled? The rules-based order isn't doing anything about it. Nobody in the G7 and the EU seems to recognize Maduro's legitimacy, yet nobody's doing anything about it. So it does seem to be a unique situation ripe for the picking in a way, especially if all the criminals were like, I don't even know if all this is true, but if those things are true, what do you do? Like, what should Trump do if they put if they just dumped a bunch of criminals out of their jails into the States?
I mean, I have an answer for this. It would be a worse outcome. But if that's happening, you would first have to get approval from the public. So you'd be talking about this. You'd have to do the messaging.
Yeah.
And you would want to arrest people domestically. I'm talking about Biden now, but yeah, I mean, his defense would be that he's mentally incapacitated. So go after Kamala Harris. She was the border czar. Then you take the military and you invade the country. Like, you're going to get a lot more deaths. But to me, that would be the right way, because you would declare a state of war. You say these people
inside, yeah.
Yeah. And you would attack them. Now, many more people would die. And you could make the argument that, well, the way that they did it now, there was less human casualties. But you've now normalized the kidnapping of a head of state, which is a very dangerous thing.
Even though it is the head of state that's worth kidnapping the most in the world. I mean, so, and I'm not justifying it. I don't even really agree with it either. I'm just saying that is the show of strength and that precise operation worth that risk?
Are you talking about invading or decapitation?
No, just taking Maduro out completely without like that precise sort of operation. You can almost make the argument that he needs to show the world that they can do that and that he's willing to do that.
If you want to do Fortress America, I personally think the purpose of this was to get China and Russia out.
Yeah.
So that's why they did it. It was an intel operation. But my point is, when you have international law and you have, or the rules based, or not even that, the rules of the game, you're over here, I'm over here. We elect our leaders, and if we're going to go to war, you use your guys at the bottom, and I'll use my guys at the bottom. The moment you go after someone's, you know, president or king, you've changed the rules now, and we're never going to go back. And I think Donald Trump recognized this. They have no intention to go back to the rules based order, which was whatever America says goes. Now it's whatever America wants to do in the moment, it goes.
I was going to ask you about that. I noticed you're right. You wrote that down on I can't remember where I read it of your work, but you mentioned you know, it was whatever America says goes. I mean, wasn't the rules based order more of like, to me, I feel like it's more of old royalty or British Empire. It kind of comes from Europe instead of America, which maybe there was a in the old days of Iraq and all that, the invasion of there, maybe they were the same, and maybe they're not the same anymore. But you know, I feel like the influence was more European or British.
I mean, it depends who you talk to and what context. I'm using it in the context of the World Trade Organization after 95,
Okay.
where they switched from the way it was during the Soviet Union, when you had the Cold War and you had the two superpowers facing off, and you had international law, and you could violate it, but you kind of went around it, not directly violating it. After that, international law was